Hi, welcome to the Tie Back Tank Sew Along. I'm Sarah. I blog over at sewingwithsarah.com where I like to share hacks and different creations that I've made and just kind of inspire others. So I'm really excited to be joining with the So English Sew Along team today for the Tie Back Tank Sew Along from Green Style Creations. I was really excited to do this one because this is one of my favorite patterns. I find it to be really versatile. I wear it all the time. I wear my versions all the time, whether I'm just momming around with the kids or working out, or whether I want to feel like I'm going to get a workout in that day, even if I never do. It's one of my favorite patterns. So I hope that you'll join in with me and dive right in. Today I'm going to be sharing a little bit about different fabric options for the pattern, as well as some supplies that you might need and just some different options you might be considering when you're thinking about the tie back tank that you're going to be making. So let's get started. One of the first things that you're going to want to do when you think about the fabric that you're going to use for the tie back tank is to print off page 3 of the pattern. Can you zoom in on this a little bit? So you'll notice that it has this stretch chart. So that's really important because when you choose the fabric for this pattern, it's going to be important to have at least 50% four-way stretch. So what that means is that the fabric is going to stretch this way and it's going to stretch this way as well. So some fabrics, just stretch kind of selvage to selvage. And that works, for a pattern that's not really fitted. But for this pattern, you're going to need to have four-way stretch, and it's going to need to be at least 50% four-way stretch. So the stretch guide in the pattern is really useful because if you take 4 inches of fabric, it's going to tell you, if you can stretch that 4 inches from here to there, then you've got that 50% stretch that you need. So some fabric choices that you might want to be looking at would be athletic knits. This one is this cool hex knit, and I use this for one of my tanks that I made just recently. So you can see, it stretches really well this way, and then this is just a scrap, but it stretches pretty well this way as well. So that's going to be a really good choice. This is another athletic knit scrap that I grabbed, and again, it's got stretch this way and a lot of stretch that way. Some fabrics will even have 100% stretch. So you might have even more than 50% stretch, and that's totally okay. Another fabric that you might be looking at, or you might want to consider, would be brushed poly. Brushed poly is a really great fabric. It drapes well, it's soft. It doesn't tend to be super breathable, so that brushed poly is not necessarily something I would use for an actual workout tank, but it would be perfect for a tank that you're just going to wear, around in your daily life. And pretty much all brushed poly that I've encountered has sufficient stretch for this pattern. Another fabric that you might want to consider would be cotton lycra. Most cotton lycras have about 5% or 3% lycra in them, and that's enough to give them a pretty decent four-way stretch. You're not creating leggings here, so it doesn't need to be super duper stretchy, but enough stretch so that you can have the pattern stretch over your bust. You can do the bands or the binding that you're going to do. That's one of the most important places that you want to have really good stretch and recovery. Fabric recovery means that when you stretch a fabric, that it bounces right back instead of staying stretched out. So some fabrics like cotton interlock tend to stretch out but don't go back very well. So you want to make sure you have good recovery. Another fabric you might want to consider would be like a rayon spandex blend. And this one, actually, I pulled this one out because it has okay stretch this way, but almost no vertical stretch. This fabric might not work out for this pattern. If it's not, your favorite fabric in the world, you could give it a try, but this is one that I might be a little bit concerned about. One final fabric that I haven't mentioned is ITY, stands for interlock twist yarn, or sometimes DTY, double twist yarn, is a similar fabric. This has really excellent, amazing drape. It's very silky. And this is a fabric that would be really awesome for a fancier tie back tank, or using one of the other pattern options that I'll discuss in a minute, just with an overlapped back. If you go on the Green Style Creations Facebook album, you'll be able to see some of the testers' creations, and one of them made a really awesome tank that was in a fancier ITY knit and was great for just going out to dinner. So I thought that was really cool because it showed the versatility of this pattern. But that's another fabric that you might consider too. So one of the great things about this pattern is that as it's drafted, it only takes 1 yard, no matter what size you're in. So you can get a lot out of one of those bundles that Sew English is offering up, or just out of your fabric stash, whatever you've got that you want to use up. A yard sometimes feels like it doesn't go very far when it comes to adult patterns. I can get a lot of baby outfits out of a yard, but for adults, sometimes it's hard to find patterns that only take a yard. So this is a great pattern for using up some of those smaller cuts. You can also use a contrast fabric for the back. So you could use one fabric for one side and one fabric for the other side, or you could use contrast fabrics for the binding or the bands. So there's a lot of ways to mix it up too. If you don't want to use all one fabric, you could kind of mix it up a little bit there. So that's the fabric. Once you've got your fabric picked out, you're going to want to think about the options in the pattern. I'll be discussing the hacks in a minute, but if you look at the pattern as it's written, it has a few options to consider. The first one that I'm going to talk about is a binding versus a band. This is a place where a lot of people get confused. What's a binding? What's a band? So I'm just going to show you this tank has both options built into it. So on the armholes of my tank, I used a binding. So it's thinner. It was folded over to the inside and stitched down. So this is a binding because it's wrapping around the edge of the tank. This around the neck is a band. So this is a rectangular fabric that's been folded over and then serged onto the neck of my fabric. So nothing was wrapped around for this. So that's the difference between a binding and a band. And they are cut differently, and the pattern gives you the pieces that you need to cut a binding versus a band. So that's your choice. If you want to learn a new technique, or you want to like the look of the binding, you could go for that. If you prefer bands because you're more comfortable with them, you could certainly do the banded option for this tank. Or you could mix it up like I did, do one for the armholes, one for the neck. So that's one of the pattern options. Another pattern option is the neckline height. Now this pattern, this one that I'm wearing, is not a good example because I actually altered this tank so that it would be more nursing friendly. Still nursing my baby / toddler. I don't know if I could admit that she's not a baby anymore. But this is something that I lowered a little bit. But as drafted, the pattern has a high neck and what they call a low neck, which probably hits about here. So the high neck is more up here, low neck is more down here. So those are another two options to consider about whether you want a high or a low neck. There's also options for the back. There's options for a racer back, and this is the racer back. So I like how it exposes the detail of like a strappy little sports bra a little bit. Or there's an option for a fuller back, which is more of a standard tank silhouette where it's not going to expose your bra as much. So that's another option to think about in the pattern. The final option that you want to consider is the way that the back is done. So this one is tied in the back, but there's another option in the pattern for simply overlapping it and hemming it together. And I think that that creates kind of a fancier look. Now, of course, you could just, leave it open, and that makes kind of a swingier look in the front. So some of the younger testers did that, and it looks really cute over a pair of jean shorts. I usually tie mine in the back, but you can kind of wait until the end to decide that too. So that option is one that you can kind of try it on. You can fiddle it around with it a little bit, and then decide what you want to do toward the end. That won't change how you cut the pattern. So as far as supplies, we've talked about fabric, we've talked about pattern options. You're also going to need your standard suite of supplies. You're going to need your sewing machine or your serger. I have a cover stitch machine that I'll be using, but that's not at all necessary. You'll need a ballpoint or a stretch needle. I do use both my sewing machine and my serger for this pattern. There's a spot, at the top of the neck where you'll be basting, and so there are just areas where you might want to use both of your machines. So make sure you have a ballpoint or a stretch needle for your sewing machine, And then, you know, just the usual ironing board, scissors, ruler, pattern weights, that kind of thing. If you're going to be joining me in any of the hacks, and I hope that some of you will, because that's one of my favorite parts of a sew along, you'll also need some tracing paper. I like to use this medical exam paper, and I'll be linking this in a blog post so you can see which paper I'm talking about and where I get it. But this is something that I use frequently. So you're going to need just some of those basic supplies, and then of course the matching thread. The final thing that I want to talk to you about is just to give you a little heads up about some of the hacks that I'm going to be showing. I'm going to be showing two main hacks. One is for a full back. So, you know, something that is not split down the back in any way. So the pattern uses the term full back to refer to how much of the back is exposed in the shoulder area. But I'm talking about completely full back piece. So I'll be showing you how to do that hack. And I'll also be showing you how to do a sleeved hack. The sleeved hack will use the green tea pattern, which is a free pattern from Green Style Creations. It's a really awesome t-shirt pattern all by itself, and I have some posts about it on my blog, sewingwithsarah.com. So I encourage you to check those out if you kind of want to get a sense of what the green tea is. But I'm going to be using those sleeves and hacking those sleeves onto the tie back tank so you can see how that looks and have that as an option if you're going into the colder months or you just like to have your shoulders covered. There's be some options for that as well. So those are the hacks that I'm offering and kind of a little bit about fabric and supplies. I hope that this has been helpful, a helpful introduction for you to the tie back tank sew along. I'm going to be posting a general questions thread as well as a fit questions thread. So if you have some questions about you know, the pattern in general or how to assemble it, or you have some questions about fit, which size you should choose, please comment and interact with me on those, and I look forward to sewing along with you. Thank you.